Welcome everyone to Catholic Sunday Scriptures in Context. This is a ministry of the Augustinian Order as well as St. Paul and St. Augustine parishes in Philadelphia. Today we are focusing on the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Our first reading comes from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah lived in a very turbulent time. It was the end of the southern kingdom. It was also the time of the beginning of the Babylonian captivity. And during this time, there was just a turnover of kings. Josiah, who was considered one of the greatest kings, died in battle. His son was a disaster, and then he was dethroned by the Egyptians who beat Josiah, and then the Babylonians came along and they captured the king and blinded him and killed his family, and then somebody else came in and they weren't faithful, and the Babylonians came back and destroyed them. So Jeremiah just saw so many bad kings. And so in this passage, he's about to criticize the last of the two kings. And he writes what a good king should be. And he begins by using the idea of a shepherd as a metaphor for a king, and how God will eventually raise up a good shepherd, one who will focus on justice. So woe to the shepherds, and he's referring to the king, and I myself will gather the remnant of the flock. And the remnant, which is a term that's used a lot in New Testament theology, is those who have remained faithful and believe in the God of creation, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the God of Jesus. And, at the end here he says, this is the name they give him, the Lord our justice. That's who this shoot to David will be, from the Jesse tree, as we know at Christmas time. Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Ephesians. As I mentioned last week, this letter was most probably not written by Paul. And this passage in particular helps us understand it was probably written after the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70. So may have even been written as late as 90 AD. And what the author is talking about here is the separation between Jews and Christians, and how that separation has broken down, and now they are seen as one in Christ. If you know anything about the temple in Jerusalem, it separated Jews from non-Jews, male Jews from female Jews, priest from non-priest, and then the high priest from the rest of the priests. So there was always this idea of separation, and separation meant holiness for them. But now, with the with the destruction of the temple, there is no separation between God and man, and no separation among the Christians themselves. You may remember how the curtain in the temple was torn in two at the crucifixion of Christ, and that was a sign of there is no more separation between God and man. So, here he says, he who made both one, which is Jesus, broke down the dividing wall. The dividing wall was one of those walls in the temple, and created in himself one new person in place of the two, and the two being the Jews and then the Greeks. And in this we find peace when there's no division among us. And lastly, it's Mark's Gospel, chapter 6. The 12 have gone out. They were deputized by Jesus to preach and to heal. And they came back and were reflecting on all that had happened. And Jesus said, come, let us go and get a little rest. But the people were in such demand of him, because he welcomed everyone. And people longed for this kind of teaching. Back in the time, really only those who had money could be taught. And there was this prejudice against the artisans, that they just weren't smart enough to pay attention to the teaching or understand the teaching, I guess I should say. But Jesus welcomed everyone to hear his words. And so there's come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. But the people just kept coming and coming. Pray for peace, and if you think this is helpful to someone, please pass it on. Thank you very much.